Same time, like, no one would really wanna be like, "Oh, there's this is dry guy and Mike being lovebirds again."
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I have friends who do podcasts and do YouTube stuff, and
Mm,
like I said, you wanna support them and you wanna, like, watch their stuff, and
yeah.
but, like, 2-hour-long episodes, like, that's tough, like, you're just it's taking you, like, 3 days just to finish it.
Yeah, man. It's like I
So,
don't have that much time in the car.
especially yeah, that's the thing too, like, especially because for me, like, I'll watch it when I'm driving, like, if I'm going to the
Mhm,
food store or if I'm on
yeah,
my way to the gym, or if I'm on the treadmill, like, that's where I wanna get, like, my podcasting in, or that's where I wanna get, like, my content in.
for sure.
So, like, I'm not trying to sit on the couch for an hour and a half and
Yeah,
listen to somebody's episode. So,
yeah,
uh, we're recording.
cool.
Uh, this is gonna be the Framework official episode 1
Sweet.
with Mike McKenzie.
Yeah, man,
Mike will be on as much as possible. I will be on every time. So hopefully, we make this a weekly occurrence.
for sure.
I know Mike from our time spent at Vitamin Shop, which, although brief, we had been friends before that, and obviously have stayed close after. So, Mike, you want to tell everybody a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. I mean, you and I go back at least it has to be 10 years now, which is
I
crazy.
believe
Yeah,
2014.
crazy to think about. Time
Yeah,
flies.
yeah, it does,
Um,
dude.
yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough to, like, be able to get you to work with me for a short, brief time, but in terms of my background, I have been in the industry in totality probably 16, 17 years. 15 of that being at Vitamin Shop, in terms of like management. I've done everything from recruiting, hiring, firing, all the fun stuff, but primarily in sport nutrition, which has been my passion for the longest time. So, like, that's something that I can talk for hours about and makes me happy to talk about. So, that's why I'm excited to be doing this because we get to talk about everything in the ins and outs of the industry and all around in life.
Yeah,
So that's been the bigger part of the last almost 2 decades.
I think that's something that, like, just makes you super credible. Like, even though, like, not to steal your thunder, but obviously you're a power lifter, and I'm a bodybuilder. And one thing that you and I always come together on is, although different aspects to our training and our approach to
Yeah,
dieting and stuff like that, we still realize that we live very similar lives. And
for
I think a
sure.
lot of times in the gyms, like, you see somebody's a bodybuilder, somebody's a CrossFitter, somebody's, whatever their training goals are, and
Yeah,
it's almost as if, like they're living their life, we're living our lives, but in
mhm,
reality, I mean, it's a struggle regardless of what
yeah,
your sport of choice is.
for
So
sure.
how long have you been
Yeah.
powerlifting now?
I've been powerlifting off and on for about 6 years. I started it as something that, like, kinda just, like, kept me going somewhat not even necessarily competitive, but just something to do once, Luna, my daughter, was born. Just because you kind of, like, fall out of the rhythm of things when you're trying to get back, like, that, personal, like, selfless or selfish, I guess I should say, side of your life, and started competing just because I just fell in love with it, fell in love with the community. And I'm glad you mentioned, like, everyone kind of in their own way, shape, or form is doing their own thing. But as niche as, like, the competitive side of the fitness industry is, I feel like everyone can kind of learn from each other. Like, powerlifters can learn from bodybuilders, bodybuilders can learn from powerlifters, CrossFitters even have their own type of niche that they could, everybody can benefit from some part of the industry that I feel like people get kind of lost in their own side of it.
I think a lot of the issues that I've kind of run
Mm.
into, and it's going to be a big part of our conversation today,
Yeah,
I think, is the supplementation side, and not to kind of allow that to take over the conversation, but
yeah,
obviously, enhancements and stuff aside, I
mm,
just mean, like, your knowledge on over the counter
yeah.
supplementations
No,
and
no, of
pre-workouts,
course.
proteins and stuff. Um,
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, I think that that's definitely one thing that does differentiate, kind of the audiences, and, like, maybe you could speak to it further. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Like, your
Yeah,
bodybuilders are more frequently, especially at the beginner, stages, the
yeah,
18 to 25 demographic is looking for those high stims and, maybe not as educated on the pump products and maybe an everyday multivitamin and some of the
Yeah.
stuff they should be taking. And as you get into powerlifting, maybe it's no supplementation at all, or obviously they're not looking to get crazy
Yeah.
shoulder pumps in the gym and stuff like that. So what's something that you've noticed, because I could go on forever about it, just in your regular everyday gym, because I know where you train and I'm not
Yeah.
going to put that place on blast.
Yeah.
That'll be an episode for a later date. But
Yeah.
like, what are a lot of the issues that, not,
Mm,
I don't want to say issues, that's not the right word. What are some of the things that you see from a supplementation standpoint that maybe people are either missing in
mm.
their everyday supplements, or maybe they're just doing too much of it?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things that people tend to do first off is they don't take into consideration like where they're at. And like I think that's a huge thing, not even just with supplementation, but a lot of the part with where their fitness journey is, like where they're currently at. So they like to jump to whatever their favorite like influencer or someone is taking or doing or advertising at least that they're taking. So like most people tend to just jump right into the over caffeinated, over stimmed pre-workouts, kind of like you were even mentioning, and they don't take into consideration like where their own health and fitness goals is. Like for instance, everyone jumps towards pre-workout, they jump towards something that like they think is going to replace the actual hard work. I guess that's the big thing that I'm saying is people are looking kind of like for something that's going to replace training hard, something that's going to replace sleeping, something that's going to replace eating, and that's like the side of it that kind of not necessarily annoyed me, but it allowed me to have my own niche with the way that I was in the industry because it kind of opens up the conversations to figure out where people were actually, are you a beginner? Do you like how often do you eat? How are you sleeping? Like what is your day-to-day lifestyle like? Because everybody's different, but everyone is, I guess that's the beginning side of everybody in the industry is they're looking for a shortcut.
Yeah, everybody asks what protein you take and
Mhm.
what pre-workout you take, where in reality,
Yeah.
I would tell people that I would ask, what multivitamin are you taking and do you take melatonin? Because I feel like melatonin is one
Mhm.
of my favorite products that I've incorporated in my stack or whatever you want to call it, just because rest and recovery is so important.
Mhm.
Obviously when you're in contest prep, but even off season, I feel like a lot of people get into the habit of I don't want to say overtraining, but training too often.
For sure.
I don't think a lot of people really know the true meaning of overtraining.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, so I think that like just adding in melatonin and being able to sleep and the rest and recovery aspect, which is really hard,
Mhm.
because not to go off on a tangent, but I
No,
think when
good.
you're not training for something every day, and I mean in off season you're still training, right? I mean you're still going in, training for a particular goal, trying to hit a certain weight.
Yep.
Just like as as a bodybuilder, you're constantly trying to bring up your weak areas,
Mhm.
for the next prep, the next contest that maybe in your sights or not.
Yeah.
But I just think like some people get into the habit of like, well, I'm not really training for anything in particular. So maybe I could train 5, 6, 7 days in a row. Oh, I
Yeah.
haven't taken a day off in 10 days. Like, do you think that there's any difference, or what really differentiates like overtraining for bodybuilding versus powerlifting? Or are they two
Yeah.
just kind of totally different fields where you would assess things differently?
Honestly, it would surprise most people that it's very similar in a sense. Just kind of like with different ideologies with like the training outlines, I should say. It's still going to be overall like management of fatigue, via like volume and intensity. So that's very similar. I think a lot of people just tend to do a lot of like junk volume, especially when they're not training for something specific, or even when they're training for something specific. And a lot of that comes down to not knowing how to train with enough intensity. So like in terms of like powerlifting,
Yes.
a lot of people do they try to make up for lack of training intensity by just, oh, like I'm not progressing, so I'm going to add more sets or more reps. And like, don't get me wrong, there's definitely a time and a place for that. But if people actually knew how to train to like an actual like high RPE training or like an actual high intensity training, they'd realize they don't need as much volume as they really think. So that's I guess similar with both ends of the spectrum. Just instead of managing fatigue or intensity on like a squat, bench, or a deadlift or variation of one of the main lifts, bodybuilders, I'm sure like when you're at the gym, you see like they're gonna do 8 exercises for chest, for example. And like, yeah, there's different parts of the chest that you can focus with different movements and different angles, but do you really need 8, 9, 10 exercises for chest, or
Yeah,
really just
I would never
yeah,
recommend that many exercises for chest. But I
yeah, but
think
you see it.
like to your point, when you say like, do you have to go into like maybe you program in 2 different push days, or
Yeah.
you program in, you have your chest day that everybody loves to do on a Monday, but then again, maybe Thursday when you
Hmm.
do shoulders, or Thursday, Friday when you do another your shoulder day, you
Yeah,
incorporate, a cable fly and an additional press or something like that.
sure.
I think, I mean, people at the beginning stage are just kind of diving in and learning their bodies. So we've all been there, right? I mean, we all saw, within the first 2 years of training, that's when you make the biggest gains. That's when you're training 7 days a week. You're drinking a protein shake 2, 3 times a day. You're
Uh-huh.
eating everything but the kitchen sink.
Yep.
You're hitting the fast food place, 3, 4 times a week.
Hmm.
You know, I think a lot of people progress early in the beginning, and then
Yeah.
they kind of hit that plateau and they dip a little bit, and all of a sudden it's either, the gear answer, or
Yeah.
it's, I'm doing something wrong. What can I do to change this? And the training is always last on these people's list. At least that's how I've seen it. Like the last thing they're going to do is give up that second chest day. The last
Mhm.
thing they're going to do from a bodybuilding perspective, the last thing
Yeah.
they're going to do is stop deadlifting. Oh, I love to deadlift. I have to deadlift. Deadlifting's what got my
Yeah.
back big. In reality,
Yeah.
you're doing it, for strength. You're doing it for clout
Mhm.
in your local gym,
For
and
sure.
you're probably blasting your glutes and your hamstrings more than anything if you're doing it
Mhm.
right. Um, and I mean that's just one example, right? Like
Yeah.
nobody wants to assess every variable.
Of course
And
not.
do you think? Because I know for myself, it definitely worked. Like when you hire a coach, do you work with a coach? You don't have to name drop anybody, but
No, no, I work with a coach. Ironically, I work with Brad Couillard. He's like the father of coaches in my respective space. Like a lot of the big name coaches kind of came from his umbrella.
that's pretty
But
cool.
yeah, so like that's been a cool experience. And yeah, and kind of just piggybacking off what you said, I think that's the big thing is everyone got into the gym because whether it was for social reasons, clout reasons, or vain. I mean, we all kind of get into the gym for some sort of vain reason. I think people would be
Sure.
lying if they don't agree
Yeah.
with that. But yeah, I mean, you can grow just from doing the most outrageous type of things because you're just getting used to that new stimulus or like newbie gains. And then when things stall and you have to actually start focusing on like getting something specific to you, people don't want to look at training variables like you mentioned, especially sleep, nutrition, and like all the actual low hanging fruits that you can control because it's hard. Like you have to actually work hard,
Yeah.
and people don't want to do that.
Coaches allow you
Yep.
to look at those variables,
Yeah.
and like you see everything that you're missing.
Hmm.
Um, like in the beginning stages, it's I have to train, I have to eat, and I have to take supplements. And
Yep.
then, as you get a little further, it's like, hey, I really appreciate a little extra sleep all of a sudden.
Hmm.
And then maybe it's, the amount that you're training and you're assessing rest days and stuff. If you were to assess, I don't, you don't have to rank them or anything like
No,
that,
you're
but,
good.
the variables that play the biggest role for a beginner, somebody going into the gym that's maybe been there for a year or two. Like
Hmm.
what are some things, not advice, but the variables that you would assess for
Yeah.
kind of like beginner Mike? Like Mike's going into the gym again, from scratch. What are some things that
Yeah.
you wish that you had assessed early on?
Probably, I would say definitely like trying to think of the right word to say it, like training outline or like training consistency. Because I feel like the biggest thing that I did, I don't know about you, because we kind of started becoming friends like after we had all been kind of training at least for a little bit of time. but like it was just, what do you feel like doing today?
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
and I think there's some good to that because you're enjoying training, so it's at least allowing you to be consistent in the gym, but not when that consistency is let's bench 5 times a week and train chest 5 times a week and train
Yeah, it was
bicep
kind of
five
it
times a
was
week.
kind of like you'd go into the gym on a Thursday and you'd be like, okay, well, I haven't
Yeah,
hit back since Sunday, or well, I've done
yeah,
back, chest, shoulders, and legs. So if I'm definitely
mhm,
going to go to the gym today, I have to hit arms, and
yeah.
then you hit the reset button. Uh,
Exactly.
go
That
on.
No, you're good, dude. I was gonna say that's my biggest thing. And then the lowest hanging fruits that I think I myself could have benefited from, and most people can benefit from, is just learning how to get yourself onto some sort of structure. Not,
Yes.
there's definitely a difference between being all in and then all consumed. So I think that's an important thing to note. Like, not letting it consume your life, but being all in a sense where you're like gonna treat, your lifestyle to coincide with what your goals are. Like we never slept. I think like for me, I'd go to the gym with all my friends, at retro on a Friday night. And instead of like focusing on even just getting like a good meal and afterwards you'd be like, oh, do you want to go meet up at the bar down the street and go to sleep at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and then meet up at the gym again at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning and then you know,
Yeah,
so that
my problem would be like I started training around like 2012, so I wasn't old enough to hit the bars, but
uh,
I would train at like 7 o'clock at night, right? Like I would
yeah,
work during the day, or whatever the case would be, and I'd train at 7 o'clock at night. I'd go home, I'd eat a massive meal, or I'd hit the drive through on the way home,
yep,
be asleep by 10:30, 11. But then I'd wake up at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep and be like,
yep,
screw it. I'll go eat real quick, take pre-workout and go to the gym again.
mhm,
Where it's like you essentially just hit back and then chest, or shoulders and then chest,
yep,
within a matter of like 8 hours. Like you didn't even, would you ever go to the gym at 8 in the morning and then again at 5 o'clock at night? Probably not. Most people,
mhm,
unless you have some type of split like that.
yep,
But I think looking at my variables, it would definitely be getting on a structure is 110% like number one. But even
mhm,
more detailed than that, it's schedule your meals. Like
yep,
know where your next meal is going to be.
yep,
Um, don't ever come home from your workout or whatever your fitness choice is
yep,
and not know when you're going to eat, or you finish a workout or you're finishing up your workout and you're like, oh man, I don't have chicken made, or
mhm,
I don't have any steaks in the fridge. Like that should never ever happen.
yeah,
It would definitely be, obviously structuring that out. um Dial back the supplements. Like
agree.
I wish in hindsight, like I knew more about the benefits of pump products and the benefits of, like, I just introduced psyllium husk
Mhm,
into my last meal of the day
cool.
during my contest prep because I would wake up with such poor digestion. Like
Yeah,
if I was doing a protein shake in the morning with oats, like it would just take me what should take me 20 minutes to eat was taking me like 45 minutes, like to the point where
yeah,
my oats would be cold and my protein would be floating at the top of the shaker by the time I was almost done.
yeah,
And I'm like, what's going on here? So me and my coach, we had assessed that and included psyllium husk. And like, I wish I knew that when I was 18 because I still had those problems. I still had the digestive issues. I just didn't know where they were coming from. To me, it
yep,
was just I didn't like breakfast.
yep,
Um, so I think knowing the importance of the supplementation, dialing back, there should never be a dry scoop or a double scoop
yeah,
in anybody's life. Um, always whole foods before a protein shake. I do 2 protein shakes a day right now. One with meal one, but it's with whole food, and
yeah,
then one with meal four. And then I'm doing 5 meals
mhm,
a day, so
yeah.
1 and 4 have the protein shake, but it's only because I'm consuming so much food around those
Yeah.
shakes.
No,
Um,
I agree.
I think structuring your training, your supplementation, and your recovery.
Mhm.
Not in that particular order. Obviously,
Yeah,
I
no,
think recovery comes first. But it's so boring to tell somebody like, "Oh man, you look like 5 pounds heavier than the last time I saw you. What are you doing differently? Oh, I'm not actually training. Like I'm recovering." It's like
mhm,
okay, like I
Yeah.
wanted to hear something cool, like you changed up your split or you're eating like a house right now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's the crazy part. Even, especially when I was still working in the stores and stuff, people just never wanted to hear like ironically working in the industry, I was one of the few people who I would say not 9 times out of 10, but like a good 75% of the time that a customer would come in and ask a question, especially training related, sometimes they wouldn't even leave buying something because I ended up like having a conversation with them about like their lifestyle and like what their whole kind of routine looked like. And a lot of times just overhauling that and going back to the structure conversation and like actually focusing on the low hanging fruits of sleep and hydration and training and like all the things that actually coincide with a good, kind of training cycle and just a way of getting results. Like a lot, like for instance, like with pre-workouts, most people don't consume enough water and sodium and things like that throughout the day. So like even just something as simple as having a liter of water, having some salt, and having some easier digesting carbohydrate like in the morning, and they're like, oh wow, all of a sudden like I have more energy and have a good training session. It's like, yeah, do the pump products and the pre-workouts have merit? Of course they do, but if you're not focusing on those things, they're not going to do anything. So they're the icing on the cake, and I think that's like the biggest thing of having structures. You realize like how much those little extra 1s and 2% of like having the supplements make a large difference when you're actually doing everything else correctly.
I think this, episode one, I going into it, I was like, all right, we're not going to have really any talking points. We're just going to kind of see where it goes. And I
Yeah.
think we actually kind of wrote the title for us in the sense
Mhm.
of like assessing the variables early on.
Yep.
Not necessarily what you're missing, but maybe what you're not looking at. You kind
Exactly.
of put your blinders on, and it's always like training first,
Hmm.
food second, and then I'll worry about the rest down the road. But
Yeah.
dude, I appreciate you jumping on. This was
Of course.
awesome. I want to keep these episodes relatively short. I don't want, people to feel
There you
like
go.
they gotta dedicate a giant block of their day just to watch us, kind of go back and
Yeah.
forth, which is something that you and I do best. I mean, we get on a FaceTime and we could literally talk for an hour and a half.
I was gonna say we definitely don't have to worry about structure. I think we more or less have to worry about capping everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we don't really need talking points. We just need to know when enough is enough.
I do.
But hey, man, this was a great episode. I think generally we touched on a lot of great things. What makes you, Mike McKenzie, very credible. I'll go into my nonsense later on if people don't already know by now. But I think this was a great episode, really assessing those variables early on, especially for beginners. In the future, I'd love to kind of assessing a little more in detail, like the training itself,
Yeah.
assessing time of day, assessing your food choices and stuff like that. So I know right now we're kind of set up to meet every Tuesday.
Mhm.
If you ever have the opportunity to jump on earlier,
Yeah.
in the week, if you want to try doing twice a week or whatever the case may be, that's something we could talk about offline. But
Man.
I'd love to do this as often as possible.
I
So
would
I,
too.
I really appreciate it, man.
Dude, of course.
All right,
Anytime.
brother.